"Don't worry, Sophie. I'll figure something out," Daniel Carter whispered into his cheap phone, though he wasn't sure what that something would be. In the thick Detroit air, heavy with the smell of gasoline and the blare of angry horns, the promise felt fragile. He stood there, a 17-year-old in a carefully ironed shirt that contrasted sharply with his time-faded jeans. His hand clutched a folder for the college recruitment fair, what he believed was his only ticket out of this life. In his pocket, only $38 remained. A number so small it felt insignificant against his sister's dreams and the invisible weight on his shoulders. Squaring his shoulders with resolve, Daniel walked toward the subway station. He had no idea that his real opportunity wasn't waiting in the fair's gleaming booths, but down a flight of dingy, dark stairs. The sickly fluorescent lights of the station swallowed Daniel as he descended. The air was cool and damp, carrying the distant rumble of an approaching train. A river of people surged past, flowing indifferently around an obstacle crumpled on the steps before merging again, never stopping. It was a middle-aged woman, collapsed in a grey business suit. Her briefcase lay open beside her, its papers scattered by the thoughtless footsteps. Daniel froze. The fair, the time, Sophie. But the image of his mother, a nurse exhausted after a long night shift, flashed in his mind. He couldn't just walk away. Pushing against the stream of people, ignoring their annoyed glances, he knelt beside the woman. "Ma'am, are you okay?" He gently shook her shoulder. No response. Without hesitating, Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Just as the operator connected, the woman groaned, her eyes fluttering open in a panic. No ambulance," she rasped, her voice weak but firm. She tried to sit up, gripping the handrail for support. I have a meeting. I can't miss it." Daniel, flustered, quickly ended the call. "But ma'am, you don't look well. You need to go to a hospital." "Please, young man," she pleaded, her eyes desperate. "The futures of so many people depend on this." The desperation in her voice made Daniel pause. He looked at his folder, then back at her. The future. Everyone was fighting for one. He took a deep breath. "Then, can I call you a cab?" The woman nodded frantically, her face a mask of gratitude. Daniel carefully helped her to her feet, hailed a taxi, and settled her in the back seat. He opened his wallet and pulled out nearly everything he had, $35, and handed it to the driver. "Go ahead," he said, then turned to the woman. "I'm coming with you." The car pulled away, leaving behind the gates of the college fair and the distant promise of a future Daniel had just sacrificed. Inside the taxi, the silence was suffocating, punctuated only by the dry, rhythmic ticking of the meter. Daniel sat ramrod straight, his hands on his knees, watching the tired old buildings of Detroit blur past the window. He was trying not to think about the college fair, about the university booths he was now missing. The woman beside him had straightened up and was trying to steady her breathing. After a moment, she turned to Daniel. Her voice, though still weak, was steadier now. "Thank you so much. I'm Linda Harrison." "I'm Daniel," he replied politely. "Are you feeling any better, Mrs. Harrison?" "Better, thank you," she said, a weary smile touching her lips. She glanced at the expensive watch on her wrist, and her expression tightened again. "I'm so sorry for dragging you into this. It's just, I can't be late," Daniel asked, his curiosity piqued. "Is your meeting that important?" Linda nodded, her gaze fixed on something far away, toward the skyscrapers in the city center. "It's more important than my own life at this moment," she said, her voice low. She pointed to a large, corner-creased blueprint in her open briefcase. "This is a project for a sustainable community center. It's a $600 million project." Daniel's jaw dropped. The number was beyond anything he could comprehend. Sophie's tuition, his wages from the garage, it was all just a speck of dust compared to that colossal figure. $600 million, he stammered. Linda nodded, the gravity of the situation etched onto her face. "And if I'm not there to present in the next 15 minutes, she glanced at her watch again. "The investment board will kill the entire project. Everything will be lost." She paused, then turned to look Daniel directly in the eye. Her expression was no longer that of a stranger. It held a profound sense of purpose. "It's not just a building, Daniel. It's a place for thousands of teenagers in the city's toughest neighborhoods to learn, play, and grow. Kids just like you, who will lose their only chance at a safe place, at a better future. Her words sent a jolt down Daniel's spine. He suddenly realized his actions were about more than just helping a stranger who had fainted. Unwittingly, he had wagered his own small future on one that was infinitely larger. The taxi wasn't just carrying a famous architect anymore, it was carrying the hopes of thousands of kids just like him. The taxi screeched to a halt in front of a gleaming skyscraper of glass and steel. Daniel hurriedly paid the rest of the fare, practically throwing his last few coins at the driver, and helped Linda out of the car. She was still unsteady on her feet, her pale face even more pronounced under the harsh city Sunday. 5 minutes left, Linda whispered, her voice barely a whisper, as they entered the chilly marble lobby. A young woman in a sharp suit, holding a tablet, rushed toward them, a worried expression on her face. "Mrs. Harrison, everyone's waiting. Are you all right? You look." "I'm fine." "Chloe," Linda interrupted, forcing herself to stand tall. "Get the boardroom ready. Get the presentation loaded." They were ushered directly into an opulent boardroom where a row of stern faces sat around a long, polished table. Every eye fell on Linda and the teenager in faded clothes beside her. The air was thick with anticipation and skepticism. As the assistant plugged the flash drive into the projector, Linda staggered and had to grip the lectern to stay upright. She took a deep, shaky breath, trying to begin, but all that came out was a dry cough. The dizzy spell had drained her of all strength. She looked at Daniel, her eyes pleading with a mixture of helplessness and desperation. Seeing this, Daniel didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and took the computer mouse. "Ma'am, let me help," he said quietly, his voice intended only for her. "Just tell me which slide to go to." Linda nodded, too weak to protest. Daniel quickly clicked through the slide's complex 3D architectural renderings, dense financial charts. Then he stopped on one titled, "Social Impact, Building the Future from the Community." The slide contained only a few short bullet points and a photo of kids playing on a rundown city street. "This slide, what's it about?" Daniel asked softly. "It's about why we need this project," Linda panted. "About the kids. About a chance." Daniel looked at the photo, and he didn't see strangers. He saw Sophie. He saw his friends from the neighborhood. He saw himself. He knew that street. He knew that kind of hardship. Without waiting for Linda to say more, Daniel turned to face the board, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Excuse me, everyone," he began, his voice trembling slightly but clear. "My name is Daniel. Mrs. Harrison. She isn't feeling well. But this slide, I can talk about this one." The room fell silent. An older man on the board frowned, about to object, but Linda's imploring gaze stopped him. "You see blueprints and numbers," Daniel said, gesturing to the screen. "But I see something else. I live in that neighborhood. I know what it feels like to have no place to do your homework because your apartment is too loud, to have no safe place to play because the streets are dangerous. A community center isn't just bricks and mortar. It's a promise. A promise that kids like my sister, like my friends, won't be left behind." He wasn't eloquent. He didn't use sophisticated business jargon. He simply spoke from his own lived experience. He talked about how a safe place could keep a kid out of a gang, how a tutoring class could change a report card, and how a basketball court could create champions. In the corner of the room, Linda Harrison leaned against the wall, watching the teenager she'd met by chance on the subway steps. And for the first time that afternoon, she smiled a smile of both relief and sheer astonishment. When Daniel finished, the room remained silent. But this silence wasn't heavy with skepticism anymore. It was filled with contemplation. His honest words had accomplished what dozens of financial charts could not. They had touched the investors' hearts. After a few exchanged glances, the older man at the head of the table stood up and began to clap. One by one, the entire board followed suit. The project was approved. As soon as the boardroom door closed, Linda, though still weak, walked over and pulled Daniel into a hug. "Thank you, Daniel. You saved everything," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. A few days later, once she had fully recovered, Linda met Daniel at a small coffee shop. She pushed a thick envelope across the table toward him. "This is a small token of my gratitude," she said softly. "I don't know how to repay you for what you did. It was more than just saving a project. You saved the dreams of so many people, including my own." Daniel looked at the envelope, feeling the weight of the cash inside. He thought of Sophie's tuition, of the piling bills at home, of his mother's old car. This money could solve all of those problems, at least for a while. He had dreamed of a miracle like this. But then he thought back to that moment in the boardroom. He hadn't helped Linda for money. He had spoken those words from the heart, from his own life. Somehow, taking the money would cheapen the act, make it feel small and transactional. He gently pushed the envelope back toward Linda. "I appreciate it, Mrs. Harrison." "I really do," Daniel said, his voice sincere yet firm. "But I can't accept this. I didn't do it for the money. I just did what I thought was right." Linda looked at him, her expression no longer one of surprise, but of deep respect. She had met countless people in the business world who would do anything for profit. But this teenager before her, who had nothing, possessed something money could never buy: integrity. "I understand," she smiled, withdrawing the envelope. "But kindness should be rewarded, Daniel. If not with money, then in another way." Linda put the envelope away, but not her intention. Instead, she pulled a long, deep blue velvet box from her purse. She opened it reverently. Inside lay a silver fountain pen, exquisitely designed yet sturdy. In the cafe's soft light, the pen's lines shone with a quiet elegance. "If you won't take money," Linda said, her voice suddenly dropping, tinged with a deep sadness, "then please, take this." She pushed the box toward Daniel. He hesitantly picked up the pen. It felt more substantial than he expected, solid and balanced in his hand. He gently turned it over and saw 2 letters delicately engraved near the cap. "MH. "It's beautiful," Daniel said, unsure of what to do. "But I can't." "Please," Linda interrupted, her gaze becoming distant, as if she were looking into a memory. "It belonged to my son, Michael Harrison." She paused, taking a steadying breath before continuing. "He was a brilliant architecture student, just like me. But unlike me, he didn't dream of gleaming skyscrapers. He dreamed of small houses, community libraries, low-cost projects for people just like you, Daniel." The pain of her loss was visible on her face, but it was mingled with pride. He always believed that architecture wasn't meant to show off wealth, but to serve people. He used to say that a good design could change a life. "I gave him this pen when he got into college." She looked Daniel directly in the eye, and for the first time, he saw the profound connection between the community center project and her personal story. "Michael died in an accident a few years ago, before he ever had the chance to fulfill any of his dreams," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "When I saw you stand up in that boardroom, talking about the kids, about the community, I didn't just see a kind-hearted teenager, I saw Michael in you. You have the same heart, the same passion for helping others." She gently placed her hand over Daniel's, which was still holding the pen. "I'm not just giving you a pen, Daniel. I'm entrusting you with a legacy. Use it to write your own future, and maybe, just maybe, you can help me finish my son's unfinished dream." Daniel tightened his grip on the pen. It was no longer just an object. It held a story, a dream, and a purpose. It was a gift of destiny, heavier than any amount of money, and more precious than any opportunity he had ever dared to wish for. The MH pen sat on Daniel's desk, a place of honor, but he had no idea it was the only tangible piece in a series of invisible gifts Linda was quietly arranging. He didn't receive a single celebratory phone call or any direct promises. The changes came to his family silently, like the sunrise quietly filling a dark room. The first miracle arrived in a thick envelope bearing the Stanford University crest. Daniel was sure it was a mistake. He'd missed the fair, never even submitted an application. But when he opened it, the words, "The Michael Harrison Scholarship for Engineering and Architecture," danced before his eyes. Full ride. Attached was a brief note from admissions. "Your profile was forwarded for special consideration by a trusted patron." Daniel looked at the pen on his desk, and he understood. A few days later, Sophie's shriek of joy shattered the quiet of their apartment. She jumped up and down, her phone displaying an email from the University of Michigan. An anonymous endowment had covered her entire nursing program tuition. Daniel's promise to figure something out had been fulfilled by a woman he had just met, in a way he could never have imagined. The invisible weights on his mother's shoulders began to lift, too. A letter from a charity she'd never heard of announced a gratitude grant for frontline healthcare workers. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for her to cut back on her exhausting night shifts, enough for her to smile more, enough for their small home to be filled with more warm dinners. Even the old, grimy garage where Daniel used to work was given a new life. His boss, a weary-looking man, joyfully told him an investor had decided to fund a complete overhaul of the facility, but not just for car repairs. A dusty corner of the workshop would soon become a creative space with 3D printers and design tools, a place where kids from the neighborhood could get their hands on the dream of architecture. Daniel didn't have to ask who was behind it all. Linda never admitted to any of it. She would only say, "It's Michael's legacy finding its own way to grow." She hadn't given him a finished path. She had given him, his sister, and his community the first building blocks. And now, the future was an open blueprint, waiting for their own hands to build it. Nearly a decade passed in the blink of an eye, enough time to transform the anxious teenager at the bus stop into a poised and confident man. Daniel Carter now sat in a spacious, glass-walled office overlooking the Detroit skyline. A silver nameplate on his desk was engraved with the words, "Lead Architect, Harrison Design Labs." The hands that were once stained with motor oil now glided effortlessly over complex blueprints, and in his hand, always, was the fountain pen engraved with the letters MH. It wasn't just a tool, it was a reminder, a legacy. The office door eased open, and Linda Harrison stepped inside. Her hair was now streaked with more silver, but her smile was as warm as ever. She glanced at Daniel's unfinished blueprint, a social housing project filled with green spaces and communal areas. "Saving the world again, Daniel," she said fondly. Daniel looked up and smiled. "I'm just trying to pay forward what I was given." His gaze drifted to a framed photo on his desk. In it, a radiant young woman in blue scrubs stood before the entrance of Detroit General Hospital, Sophie. She had not only graduated with honors from the University of Michigan's nursing program, but had chosen to work at one of the city's frontline hospitals, serving some of its most underprivileged patients. Every day, she was doing exactly what he and Linda were doing, just in a different way, healing and caring for the community. Linda looked at the photo, too, her eyes full of pride. "She's a wonderful nurse. You two are the living proof that kindness, once planted, can truly blossom." Daniel nodded, giving the pen in his hand a slight squeeze. He hadn't just built buildings. Alongside Linda, he had rebuilt his own life, his sister's life, and was continuing to build a better future for the city that raised him. Success, for him, wasn't a title or a salary. It was the chance to continue Michael Harrison's dream every single day. Daniel's success wasn't just in his designs. He knew the opportunity he'd received was a debt of kindness that had to be repaid. Together with Linda, he turned Michael Harrison's legacy into a living torch. They officially established the Michael Harrison Scholarship, a foundation dedicated not just to giving money, but to giving belief, the belief that circumstance doesn't have to define your future. Years later, one late afternoon, Daniel was driving home when he caught a familiar sight. On the side of the road, a boy of about 16 was sitting defeated on the curb next to a broken bicycle. A portfolio of drawings was scattered around him by the wind. Daniel pulled over. He didn't see a stranger. He saw a reflection of himself all those years ago. "Need a hand, kid?" he asked. The boy looked up, scrambling to gather his papers. I was trying to get these to the community center for a design competition, but my bike broke. The deadline is almost up." Daniel looked at the drawings. They were raw, but in every line, he could see the passion and a talent waiting to be polished. Instead of making a powerful phone call, he simply said, "Hop in, I'll give you a ride." They talked on the way. The boy's name was Jason Miller, and he dreamed of becoming an architect who could build sturdy homes for working-class families. Daniel didn't make any grand promises. He just listened, shared a bit of his own story, and when they arrived at the community center just in time, he handed Jason his business card. "Here's my card," Daniel said. "These drawings have a lot of heart, but to win a scholarship, you'll need more than that. Give me a call. I can show you a few things." Jason didn't receive an instant miracle. He wasn't granted a special exception. Instead, he received something far more valuable, a mentor. Over the next year, under Daniel's guidance, Jason studied, refined his skills, and built an impressive portfolio. He applied for the Michael Harrison Scholarship just like everyone else, and he earned it on his own merit. The circle of kindness hadn't just repeated itself, it had evolved. Daniel hadn't just given Jason a chance, he had given him the tools to seize the opportunity for himself. And as he watched Jason accept the award, his hand tightening around the pen in his pocket, he knew that Michael's legacy would never end. It was just beginning again, sparked by a single, small act on the side of the road.